Welcome back to another episode of Relatively Damaged Live. My name is Angela, and this is
Kat.
The live shows are currently streamed to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. Am I forgetting somewhere? I might be forgetting somewhere, but that's okay. Remember to follow and subscribe and share with your friends. On the Monday segment of the show, Kat and I discuss topics we find interesting for about 30 minutes. So, what's today's topic? I bet you're wondering.
How do I deal? I'll read the topic since you get to read the quote today.
Okay.
Our topic today is, how do I deal with powerlessness in the face of war or trauma?
Oh, yeah. There is a quote from Psychology Today, because everybody knows we have to start with a quote.
That's our thing.
You guys are powerless now. No, I'm just kidding. Feeling powerless is an important underlying impact of trauma, particularly in chronic trauma, continued exposure to domestic violence, abuse of any form, war, poverty, and others. Victims usually report that they felt powerless to stop or change their circumstances. Victims of chronic trauma may lose the ability to make decisions in their lives. And again, that was from Psychology Today. Yeah.
That's very powerful.
Yeah.
Just because, we always think, oh, well, you can pull yourself out of it. You can pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You can overcome it. And for many people, there are those people who will be in those situations of trauma, of poverty, of war, and they will come out of it. And those are the people that we look to as heroes, as examples. But the truth of the matter is, for most people, it takes more than that. It takes an understanding of their trauma to be able to come out of it and thrive.
I agree. There's a really great article by Robin Brickell where she says the word powerless is loaded. Feeling powerless during abuse or trauma likely made you never want to feel that way again. Power was taken from you, and you may feel a need to be back in control and never be powerless again. And having an acquired disability, for me, talk about powerlessness. And then, I really want to say thank you to my caregivers that I had at first, because I really felt like I needed to control everything. And I think I watched them like hawks, like, oh no, that needs to go here. And then they knew. And they loved me. You know what was fantastic about it? They loved me. Even with that I think they knew that they could understand and have compassion or empathy for that sense of powerlessness. There we go.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because the quote by Robin Brickell, it really led me to see that, is that, yes, so you want to take whatever power you can have and just hold on to it tight-fisted for as long as you can. And yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so it's no wonder to me, as I think and ponder on that quote there, why in relationships with alcoholics or other people, that people who are codependent, right? It's like for whatever reason, there's this how do I want to put this? Like the decision making power isn't there to make healthy decisions, and so it's really easy. Hi, dogs. Augie and Boomer, we hear them. Hello. But there's this need to control it, like in such a big way. Hey, Trevor, glad you could join us. And I think that so for the codependent, it turns into controlling the other person, or at least attempting to.
Absolutely. I was thinking, I mean, here you were talking about your example with caregivers and feeling that powerlessness. I mean, I was even thinking like when I was working and I had a taste of, authority. I had authority over what I was doing. And then eventually I became a supervisor and I had authority over other people. And what I really realized, and it took me a long time to learn to be a better supervisor from that point, but having those codependent kind of tendencies, man, when I had the power, I wanted the control. I was, like, you do, this is the way you do it, just do it the way, I'm telling you to do it, instead of what I eventually came around to is, okay, this is the outcome that needs to happen. You figure out how to do it. Or if there were some things like you absolutely had to do A before B because you couldn't do B without having done A, I would do that. But of course, there's always little different ways to accomplish A, different ways to accomplish B. And I left it up to each person to do what was best for themselves. And then we talked about, was it working? And that for me was kind of a revelation into coming into that, being able to relinquish that power. But it took a long time, having felt powerlessness and then finally getting a taste not only over myself to a certain degree, but having responsibility for others. I took it to that extreme.
Yeah.
And so, I'm thinking like about, people who come from these war situations and what they're going through and how they have to adjust. And I think I had spoken last week about a conversation I had with a woman from Ukraine, and she wanted to go back there again because she wasn't there. She didn't know what was going on. She felt powerlessness. She almost felt like if I could go back there, I had some power, at least over her little corner of her life, and the things that affected her. I thought it was pretty brave, but looking at it in terms of this, it's about wanting to have some power in the situation.
Yeah, that control, which I think is like what Trevor's talking about here in his comment. When you have the power, you want to control the tiny. I think because the outcome is on you, whether good or bad. And I don't know. Sometimes I have to ask myself: is that true? Is the outcome only on me?
Right.
There are so many things that I don't have control over, that when I look around, sometimes it's easier to acknowledge that lack of control. But I want to read over a quick list here about how trauma survivors try to control their lives to keep themselves safe. And again, this is from Robin Brickle, and I think this is a beautiful list. Trauma survivors may not want to feel feelings. They see feelings as the F word. Trauma survivors may not like compliments, especially when abusers used words for manipulation or control in the past. Compliments may not feel genuine if you believe they hide sinister motives. Trauma survivors may resist change, as change can feel especially risky, scary, and dangerous for them as an unknown. A constant state of hypervigilance or waiting for the other shoe to drop is a mindset trauma survivors may use to protect themselves. Trauma survivors may use a coping mechanism like drugs, alcohol, sex, self-harm, or dissociation as a means to stay safe. And the shoulds are another method trauma survivors may use to keep a tight grip on their life. This is an attempt to control and a way to avoid feelings. I really love that list because it's like the little nuances that we don't even realize we're doing because we've experienced trauma. And I think you know this, Kat, I'm of the belief that we've all experienced trauma at some point.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I really love that list. It was making me, think of, uh, some of the things and some of the people in my life. I think I've spoken of this before about my grandfather, having to being forced to fight in World War II, and then coming out of the concentration camp, the Russian concentration camp, and I wish, unfortunately, he passed away when I was 21. So I was too stupid then to ask questions. Although I don't know, from what I understand from my aunt, is that he probably wouldn't have answered them. Again, to cover up that trauma. There's certain things that I know about, but I don't know the full story, and I don't think I ever will. But just to see some of the reactions. To things, and the avoidance, not wanting to talk about it, not wanting to let others know that experience. And I know, especially with his children and grandchildren, a lot of it was not to see the weakness, not to see the powerlessness.
Right, because being powerless in some way can mean weakness, or at least that's what it feels like. I
Yes.
can't. I guess I would say with my hands, I would say I can't fix my hands, therefore I must be weak, or I must be powerless. I hadn't really thought of it, but I think that's very true for me. That I saw that then as a weakness, so it took a long time for me to accept that I had a disability. Because I saw having a disability as weakness, which, even though I knew people and I loved people that had disabilities and I didn't see them any differently, then, I saw their soul, but for some reason when it happened to me, I couldn't see it.
And I think that's something that's very difficult for those who have not been through the various kinds of trauma or war experiences or poverty. It's very difficult to understand that impact of that. I mean, I know people who have come from poverty and they have a very different relationship with money than people who've always had money.
Well,
Or affluence, you were saying, I want this, and then you get it. So, and when I'm talking poverty, it's not just, well, you're wearing, clothes from, Sears or Target or Walmart, and other people are wearing clothes from Macy's or wherever. It's like, no, you're having to get your hand-me-downs. You're having to get clothes from garage sales. You have food poverty, where you might not know where your next meal is coming from.
Yeah.
And that's a different kind of poverty. That's the poverty that's really traumatic.
And Trevor's making a good point as far as disabilities go. I think, is like, there's this underlying message of being told you're not weak and yet being treated as if you are, which is that's so that's gaslight. Isn't that gaslighting? Like, you know, in some form. I mean, I know there's great intention behind it, but I don't think I had thought of it that way before. Um, hmm.
Well, I think that thanks for confirming that, Trevor. I think that, for people who don't have that experience, I mean, I don't know what it's like to have caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
I had moments of that. Yes, where I've needed somebody to help me after a surgery or something like that. But it was short-lived, and I knew it was going to be short-lived.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and I knew the feeling of weakness in that moment, but I also knew there was something coming out of the other side.
Right.
And so I think, everybody has had moments of weakness, where you're ill or you've had a surgery and you need help with that. And then, but knowing you're going to come out the other side. So then you see people who you perceive as, well, Angela, you can't use your hands, so I'm going to do these things for you.
Yeah,
Rather
without
than,
even checking in with me to
yes,
see.
yes, and that's
Oh,
the thing.
what if I
Not
want to try, even though that is one of those things. Oh my gosh, I'm so lucky with my caregivers right now because sometimes I just want to try. I do, and miserably fail because I don't know, there is something about that trying and that failing that says I'm still alive.
and here is something I've learned. Is is can I help you with anything?
Mm-hmm.
Putting the question out there.
Yeah.
Whether it's a person, who's having trouble getting their groceries in their car, to, can I hold the door for you? Um, asking the questions,
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
making an assumption.
I love that what Trevor just said. They think they're saving you embarrassment or failure. And here I'm saying how much I need that to help me feel alive.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Ooh,
I mean, that's the question. Is that the right thing to do? Is to ask people if you can help them,
I think so. I mean, for
or do you
me,
just wait? Do you just wait for them? Can you do this for me?
I think it takes that relationship though. I think there needs to be a certain amount of trust and communication. Like I will tell my caregivers, hey, like mine are really good. They will just say, remind me they're here. Hey, I'm right here. And sometimes it will be a little more obvious, but sometimes, especially if I'm like, like cranky, I just want to be like, but no, I can do this today. And even though I know that there's a great chance of failure, sometimes I just have to try.
Mm-hmm.
I can't explain it. And luckily, I have caregivers. Trevor said they don't want to wait. Luckily, I have caregivers who are willing to wait. With the kids, one of them is much more will behave like the caregivers, and the other one is much more. It must be done now. Like they don't want to wait. Like they're so like that one is more impatient with me, but I think that is so important to have that.
Well, and then let's say you go into a situation where um, it may not be like a physical disability.
Mm.
You go to you have a different kind of situation. Like we were walking the dogs yesterday, and there was a young boy, and it was obvious to me that he had some kind of disability. He wanted to pet the dogs. Well, Boomer she's very skittish. And I could tell the boy wasn't going to go away until he could pet one of the dogs. Augie is much more done, because we're trying to tell him, oh, sweetie, I know you want to pet the dogs, but they're not really all that friendly. They're just
Mm-hmm.
very excitable. And so finally, I kind of saw that he wasn't understanding. So I told him to come over, and I was able to get Augie calm and then let him pet Augie. And then he went away, you know. And so then Boomer was able to calm down. But it was the kind of thing, it was sensing in the moment what is the, you know, what is the right thing to do and hoping that you do the right thing. So
Mm.
let's say you have somebody who has another kind of trauma, you know, be it uh
Something we
you
can't
know,
see.
right. So let's somebody with PTSD
Hmm.
and they freak out when a car backfires, you know,
Yeah.
a war kind of situation, and you know, like what, what's the deal?
Hmm.
And um, kind of, for me, I'm learning to let that space be there, that space to say it's okay. So like Augie, both our dogs are rescue dogs. Augie has certain fears. She was found as a puppy on the streets of Chicago. So she has fears of loud noises like trucks and things slamming. And I'm learning for her to have that space and just
Mm.
calming her down, letting her know it's okay. Mommy knows it's okay.
Mm.
And giving that space, it's a dog, yes, but giving that space for her trauma. So what if we were to take that and realize that people have that same thing and give
Mm.
people that space to be able to, you know, yes, when I hear loud noises, they scare me because, and then just
Right.
let them know it's okay and just love them and let them be in that space and work it out in their own time. Whatever the
Right.
trauma is.
Well, I think also there's sometimes where it's their reaction is. I know there were times where my reaction was not helpful or not appropriate at all. And so I think that also at the same time, it would be, really setting clear boundaries on what's acceptable in that space and what's not acceptable in that space, which really I do think comes from a sense of love.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if someone's got PTSD and they want to yell or hit or do something that injures me or things around me, then it would be really important to I think say, hey, if you're gonna when you do that, or if you continue to do that, I will leave, or I this
Right.
is and then stick to my boundary on what's okay.
Well, and that's it. You're not making it about, you're recognizing their behavior. You're
Hmm.
calling them out on it. But giving the space for them to, oh, yeah, okay.
Hmm.
Hopefully. And if
Yeah.
not, yes, because you don't want to add to the trauma. Because as we know, trauma adds to trauma.
Right. And I think in some ways, if I don't say something, that could add to it, right? Because then they get used to being able to have that behavior, whether it's appropriate or not.
Yes.
And then it finds its way into other areas of our lives. Now, we have about 7.5 or less than 7 minutes. I wanted to talk, if you don't mind, really quick about it's towards the end of the article that we'll put in the comments, that owning powerlessness over past traumas actually is part of healing. And, in Alcoholics Anonymous, admitting powerless over alcohol or drugs is one of the first steps. And I thought that was really interesting. And she gives an example later for a trauma survivor. Admitting powerlessness could look something like this: I've realized I'm powerless over the trauma that happened in my past. There was nothing I could do to prevent it then, and there's nothing I can do to undo it now. Nobody can change the past, yet many try to live as if it's possible to control the impact of the past. Maybe you're constantly fighting to get it right this time, putting up boundaries and barriers that could be cutting off genuine connections today. You may be in a place where you're reenacting the trauma, living in a hypo or hyper vigilant vigilance, feeling alone, and perhaps believing that others are out to hurt you. tightening control may feel like you have power over that past trauma, and you're still living your life in trauma response mode. I think that admitting that powerlessness in trauma is extremely, extremely difficult and probably terrifying. I'm not going to say probably. It's terrifying.
I would agree with you on that. Because we don't like that feeling of powerlessness.
Mm-mm.
But I think the thing that is that's that, as it says, that first step to healing.
Mm-hmm.
I was powerless over that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm powerless over, being beaten as a child, being poor, having a disability,
Whatever.
being in
Yeah.
a country at war. I was
Mm-hmm.
powerless over all those situations. And admitting that and saying, okay, so the reactions, like you say, are in that powerlessness coming out. I'm trying to grab power, grab power, grab power. There's
Mm-hmm.
something about the acceptance that says, okay, I mean, we were talking earlier. We were joking about powerlessness in a way. My water heater just broke earlier this week. My shower broke.
And
We
I
were
was talking about the weather. It was supposed to be nice and warm this week, and it's raining outside. This was
right.
not. I mean, we're planning to have some fun this week, and it's going to be cold.
There you go. You know, initially, the jokes all started because we had some connection difficulties at first.
Yes.
But, were we powerless over those difficulties? Yes. Was there something we could do about it? Yes. Now, the weather, you can't really do anything about it, but you can find ways to have fun in different ways, correct?
Right.
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 We figured out the problem. We connected, we disconnected, we reconnected, all that kind of stuff. With my
Mm-hmm.
hot water heater, I've got someone coming out later today. Hopefully they'll get it fixed, or if we have to replace it, we'll do that. So there's things the powerlessness is this certain point,
Mm-hmm.
but then in accepting that I'm powerless over that and seeing where you do have the power,
Right.
i.e., what can I do to live with the situation that I'm in?
Yeah. Well, and controlling other people doesn't work now. So it's kind of interesting to me that even in that powerlessness mindset, that I thought somehow it's like this thinking error happens, I think is what it would be called. And I still think that, but back then, if I could have just controlled it, maybe it wouldn't have happened. And that's not true. And I think there's something really interesting when it's like, well, okay, and yet it happened, and that's the reality of it. Instead of going the other way, oh, I need to control it, da 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 da. Once I get to, well, it happened, I was powerless over it. That's the reality of it, and I didn't like it. And now I can have some peace about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes getting to that point, and that point is so hard to get to when I'm certain that everyone is out to get me.
Right. I was thinking, and unfortunately, because of the craziness this week, so it's going to be a very poor paraphrase because I know we're coming to time. Um, Viktor Frankl,
Yes.
and talking about the Holocaust survivors. So
Mm-hmm.
the ultimate, face in war. These people were, many of them were facing certain death, and the one thing that could not be taken away from them, if they chose not to give it away, was their faith and their dignity.
Yeah.
And so they kept that, and those who did survive, and had that faith and dignity, like Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, it's almost
Came.
like what you're saying is you can't take away what's happening in here or in here.
Yes.
No one can take away what is happening inside of me.
And so, yeah, I think that's the accepting the powerlessness and learning to live in the situation that you're in. It allows you then to take action.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like I've heard it said the 3 A's: awareness, acceptance, and then action.
Yeah.
So
Beautiful. Thank you, Kat.
thank you, Angela.
No problem. There's also a Relatively Damaged podcast where I interview amazing guests who've overcome some sort of struggle in their lives and how they found hope and healing. I'm thinking at some point they admitted they were powerless. I'm going to have to ask that question from now on or try to remember. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple, and many more. I'm Angela, and this is
Kat.
And we'll see you next week. Talk to you later.